Welcome, Daniel Nation, to our monthly podcast, The Daniel Report. It's great to see everybody back on the show this month. And tonight, I've got an awesome guest, a great friend of mine, the awesome Miss Evelyn Brooks. And Evelyn and I go back to the Frisco Conservatives days for running for local office. And Evelyn now sits on the State Board of Education and is just a fantastic member of that board. And so tonight, first of all, Evelyn, we want to welcome you onto our podcast. Glad to have you tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for this invitation. Can't wait to talk.
Awesome. So, Evelyn, your story is one of those awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping stories that I write about in my book, Daniel Nation, When Christians Take a Stand in Civil Government. And actually, your story inspired me to take those buses down to Austin to lobby for pro-conservative legislation. So let's talk about how did you get involved with running for the State Board of Education?
Oh, and I was asked, believe it or not, I was asked by neighbors to run for the local Frisco ISD board. It was not on my radar. I was at the time homeschooling. I had been a stay-at-home mom for many years, and I was just really involved in family and community. I was actually serving on our HOA board. I was the president then. And so I think a lot of neighbors just saw some leadership qualities in me and the gift of teaching that I had. And they asked, and I was really taken back because, that again wasn't on my radar. So I said, yes, finally, after someone said, I will help you. I have a group who will help you. So that's the key word when you're looking for someone you think would be just a great candidate and leader to help lead in a position, an elected position. Just ask and then tell them, I'll help you. So that's awesome. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, you have a great story that I want you to share because I know that you ran for Frisco School Board. And what year was that you ran?
Oh my goodness, please don't ask me that. Maybe
it was around 2020, 2021, somewhere in there, right?
2019, yes. About 2020, forgive me, about 2020.
Okay. Yeah. And so I know you ran for school board and you didn't win that election. And then I remember one day at our homeschool academy where you taught, you taught literature, world literature, I believe. And we ran into each other there at the building and you said, Pastor, I'm thinking about running for State Board of Education. My husband and I are praying about it. And the filing deadline is on Monday. And I think this was a Thursday. And you're like, what do you think? And I was like, okay, wow, this is a big leap of faith. But tell us your story, how you actually won that election. It's an incredible story.
Yeah. So after losing the local election for the state board, I was asked the question, so what now? And I said, the State Board of Education. And people laughed. I had people laugh initially and they're like, oh, no, really, seriously. And I said, yes, the State Board of Education, because we have to make an influence, for the majority of the students in the state. I said, what a great opportunity to represent even more students. So it really tickled people. And I really got a kick out of watching people's reaction. And so once my husband, which, Brian, I have to just put a little bug out there. And because of this amazing husband of mine, I'm able to volunteer full time and work many hours a week and without complaint. So I'm very appreciative to him. So he was not really excited when I said, let's run again. Less than a year from the first campaign. So it really took some time for him, my family, to really kind of put their, wrap their brain around why in the world would she want to put herself through this again and the family again. Just really driven, I'm confident in the gifts that I have and the passion, when you're passionate about something, you just go for it. And so I gained a lot of experience from the first experience, and I knew I can do it. If nothing else, fight a really good fight. And so I talked to campaign consultants and managers, and they were like, you're going to need about $150,000 just for the primary, just to win that. And I thought, well, I don't have $150,000, but I'm a hard worker. And I really feel like God called me to do this, and I have a call in my life. I was born a teacher, and I felt like I was ready. And so I tell people the story of how this journey progressed. I just didn't let money influence where I was going. I let nothing get in the way of where I was headed, and I was passionate because I saw the need in our families and our children, and I knew I was doing something great, something bigger than myself. And so I didn't let money discourage me. I just really was focused on running a really good race of being a woman of integrity, of honesty, truth, and just true to my core, because it gets really nasty, right? People lie, and you hear a lot of things like, really, that's me. And you know, some things aren't so nice. You know, some people are a little cruel, and it's kind of like you just blur that out because you know there's something driving you that's greater than all the things around you, all the people around you, all the distractions around you. It's not easy running, you know, as you know, but I was determined. And I told people my motto was this: we bring in what comes in, and we oh, it was a really good one. Forgive me. Um, uh,
You
we
said we're only going to spend what we
we
bring in.
spend what we bring in and trust God for the rest. That is the motto. The motto is we spend what we bring in and trust God for the rest. I didn't have all the resources for the greatest commercials or advertisement. I couldn't do a lot of those things, but I looked at the majority of the things I needed, you know, like good signs. And before a good sign, I needed a message. I needed to know without a doubt that I was ready for this, that I recognized the problems, that I knew how to solve these problems. So I took most of my time getting familiar with the battle and preparing and doing my homework. And so I put all that energy into a website. My website was good, by the way, because I didn't rush it. I took my time. I was careful about the wording. And I just made sure that anything I touched, it was done with excellence. And if you couldn't tell by now, that's the kind of teacher I am. I didn't expect my students to do anything I myself was not willing to do. So hard work, and that was my motto. And can I add something else here?
Sure.
So in my position, District 14, on the State Board of Education board, there's, you know, we're getting ready to run. So there's a candidate who I was just watching, you know, tweet online. And she made a statement that I am the candidate with $100,000 cash on hand. And you know what I thought to myself, Brendan? I thought, is this where we are right now? Have we stooped ourselves so low that you can buy a seat, an elected board, I mean, you're elected by your neighbors, your peers, your and people all around you, and it's a money issue. And I thought that's the wrong way to start. That's the wrong way to start. $100,000 on cash. Let me tell you something. This is a very serious field we're in when it comes to working with children, and I call it my ministry. And I take it very seriously because we get one chance to get it right. So if money is already the motivation or what you boast about, then that's probably not an effective leader for this position. And I just wanted to throw that out there because the timing is great.
Awesome. Yeah, your story is just so inspirational, Evelyn. And when I called you the day after the election and I saw the election results that you had won the primary, I was really in shock. And I said, Evelyn, I said, how did you do this? You only had like 3 months to campaign or 4 months to campaign, and the deadline, you filed right at the deadline, and you had to cover all those counties across Texas from Frisco to Waco. I'm like, how did you do it? And you just said, well, you said, Pastor, God, you know, God just showed up, and people started sending out mailers and campaign materials upon my behalf. They'd never even met me, and they were campaigning for me. And it was just such an awesome story of faith and encouragement. And if you're a candidate out there watching this interview tonight, you should really be encouraged by Evelyn's story. And, she really is inspiring how God has used her on the State Board of Education. So, Evelyn, what kind of background did you bring to the State Board of Education when you got elected? What are your, credentials, and what's your experience that you brought?
Yes, and I'm glad you highlighted on that too, because I people would come to my home on the weekends, precincts, the boots on the ground, and they would take stacks of push cards, 500, 1,000, and they pushed that. And I built relationships with precinct chairs. I built relationships with everyone, great and small. We never minimize anyone when it comes to being a civil servant. So I'm glad that you made mention of that, Brandon. What I bring to the table is definitely, as I said earlier, I was born to teach. I was born with a pencil in my ear, is what my mother said. She said, "You were born with a pencil." I always just knew that my life calling was to teach. And it's not just the teaching element, it's really understanding young people. It's understanding youth, it's understanding the developmental process of a child, and going into adolescence and then adulthood. And it's really beautiful to just watch that process, to watch the maturity and the growth, and to just know that God has given us the authority to steward over children, to protect them, and to mentor them, and to disciple them, and to show them by leading with example, by being the parent, by just really standing up for what is really good, the goodness of humanity and life. And it's really an honor to serve young people. So it always has come natural to me. And again, dedicated my life to it. I first started in Maryland, and then I went to teach in Denver public schools, for Denver public schools. And then I went on to teach for one of the best districts in the nation, in Fairfax County, Virginia. And all of my experiences gave me a different look on just the different needs in students, the different needs that students from more affluent communities have versus students who come from a disadvantaged family or disadvantaged background. I really can't put family in there. I could just say some disadvantages in the community. And what you notice is a lot of times we'll put a dollar sign or a value on a person's life, and we should not do that. Some of the most beautiful experiences I've had teaching have been from my experiences in the inner city, teaching children who are so resilient, whose parents are so loving and really want the best for their children. And all these experiences have really just helped me to understand the needs that are in every child. And I just break it down to three basic needs. Children need to feel loved, they need to feel safe, and they need to have high expectations all across the board. Every student has a potential. Every adult has a potential. And our goal should be to make sure that they reach that potential so that they can be whatever God designed them to be. And that brings me to a point where the apple seed has a calling, a purpose, and that's to be an apple, to produce apples. Our children have things within them. They have gifts and they have these talents. And if we are intentional about raising them and teaching them and discipling them, we can bring that out and they can reach that max potential. So if their purpose is to educate, they're an excellent educator. If it's to be a judge, if it's to be an entrepreneur, they're just excellent at it. And it's because of the way we cultivate that calling that's already in them. So if you couldn't tell, I'm a little passionate about children and young people and education, because it is a calling that I take very seriously. So it's an honor. So I started in the classroom, elementary level, and then I stayed home. Once my first daughter was born, I thought I can't choose between one or the other because I put everything into what I do. And so I said, I'll just stay home until this child is ready for school, and then I'll go back into the classroom. So we fast forward, I had two daughters, and I sent my first child to kindergarten. And I just remember asking her, what math? What are you doing in math class? And I remember her saying, math buckets. And I said, well, honey, what's inside the math bucket? I didn't receive any correspondence, at home. I would say that there were some readers that would come home with 2 or 3 words on each page. And so that started to concern me a little bit. And I wondered, does the teacher know? I asked, did your teacher test your reading skills to see where your reading ability is? And she says, I don't think so. And so there were just a lot of question marks. There was not a bridge between school and home where I could also help my child academically and also understand what the teacher was observing when I sent her to school. And so that was a little concerning. So the teacher did finally assess her reading, and they're like, oh, she's at a 3rd grade reading level. Let's get her in an appropriate reading class to kind of help push her along. And so I just started seeing some things that, well, not every teacher, and I really can't blame teachers. I really didn't know what the problem was. At that point, I just knew that I might have to consider teaching my own children. And then what really did it was one day, my daughter comes home and she says, I don't like my color. I don't like this hair. And she really started to care at 5 years old what she looked like. And then how she was dressing. And then she didn't want to be seen with me. And I knew there were some things that I did not train in her yet. And so that kind of was the final moment where I said, well, let me kind of take control of educating my own children and instill some positive self-esteem, and then get to that academics part, right? Because I really, I could teach. And so I hated it initially. And I thought, this is not what I signed up for, Lord. I thought I heard you right. And I was sobbing. I was disciplining the girls a lot. I have 2 children, and one was 4 and the other was 5, or 5 and 6 at this time. And we weren't having fun. I didn't like myself. And so I just heard in my heart, I didn't ask you to move your children out of school to make them into geniuses. I want you to teach them about me. I want you to show them how to love their neighbor so that when you send them into the world, they are ready. They are ready morally, ethically, and academically. And then I heard in my heart, and take a break. So I said, I used that advice. I took a break. I regrouped. I learned more about this homeschooling, and I did it differently. I did it our way. And I got outside of that the way I was trained as a teacher. And I really just met the needs of the child. So when I thought about what is my vision for my children, I thought, well, I want them to love the elderly. I want them to respect them. So guess what? I took them to an older friend of mine, an elderly friend, and to her retirement home. And I mean, I flew the girls, we flew to Washington, D.C., where she lived. And we did life with her. We would fly out there for a week or 2, and they really built this bond between 2 very different age groups, but they had so much in common. And there was such a tenderness that my daughters developed about taking care of the needs of our elderly people. And then I thought, I also want children who understand history. And so I gave them a rich foundation in the richness and the diversity of our nation. And I showed them how far we had come and how they were going to carry the baton forward into the next generation. I wanted them to understand the Constitution so that they could stand up for their rights and understand what their responsibilities are as citizens of this great nation. I had to teach my daughters that we're not victims, but we're victors. We come from a great people, and God has never left our side. So I wanted them to understand that. So I taught history heavily in our home. So we took a lot of what I called tours. I tell some people this story. I took the girls on an African-American history journey. And we traveled all up and down the South. And then we ended our journey in Washington, D.C., and we went to the Capitol. And we walked on the Capitol. And when we went to the Capitol, there's this big plaque that says, "This was built by the hands of slaves." And so, and even when we went to George Washington's home, we went to that property, and we were able to walk the fullness of the land. And we were able to see the Potomac River, and we were able to sit, not Abraham, I'm sorry, George Washington, forgive me. And so we were able to sit on his porch where he once sat. And we were able to go to the table where he once ate meals with his wife. And I mean, I got so proud of this nation. And so when we got home, I said, "Girls, let's debrief about our journey and about our history." And we came up with a consensus that we did not go on our African American history journey, but we went on our American history journey.
Awesome.
And we're all a part of this story, and we all matter. So
that's awesome.
Good.
Wow, what an incredible journey you've been on. And thank you for sharing, where that journey started and how that took you all the way to the State Board of Education. So tell our viewers that are not familiar with the State Board of Education, because we've never even done a podcast about the SBOE before. This is our first one. What does the State Board of Education do, and how are y'all different than the Texas Education Agency?
I love that question, because we are different. And sometimes people will put the two of us together, but we are not. We have a government bureaucracy or government bureaucrats who are working on essentially the laws that were passed, that are passed. And then we have an elected board who represent the people of Texas. We represent you. We represent Texans, all Texans from this great state. So there's 15 different districts. And so we have 15 members on the board. And so I serve in District 14, and there's 18 counties in this district. I have Palo Pinto, McLennan County, Johnson County, Ellis County, and some parts of Dallas. And so it goes all the way. I have a really nice, diverse group, a district that I serve. And sometimes what I notice while serving Texans, is that sometimes I'll go into other parts of Texas because parents will call me. And I'll call their representative and say, "Hey, can I help you with this? Or can I help serve you in response to this parent's request or this teacher's request?" So I like to just tell people that, yes, I'm in District 14, but I represent all Texan citizens. And so I like to just think of it that way, as we collectively are meeting the needs of our fellow Texans. TEA, the Texas Education Agency, it's ran primarily under our Commissioner of Education, who was Commissioner Mike Morath, and he is appointed to his position by the governor. So Governor Abbott appointed him to essentially run all things Texas education and all things education. So it's a really big job. It's a really big role. I think that the way that our system is set up is great when we can actually represent the people. And so what I really want to, and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, I just want to make sure that the public is aware of what our responsibilities are and how important it is when legislators pass bills, because they directly affect the way that we can represent you. The laws that are passed directly represent or have consequences that it plays into how you can be represented even at a local level. Let's put it that way. So what happens at the Texas Education Agency, what happens at the Capitol, what happens during each legislative session directly affects your life. It affects my life. It affects all the children's life, even, post high school. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too while we're here. So what are some of the responsibilities of the board right now? And I say right now because a lot of the responsibilities have changed. The authority has now been given in great, huge amounts to the Commissioner of Education. And so what is left after that, after this legislative session, is we still have some say in the TEKS in getting groups together, and in writing the TEKS, being a part of that. We don't write the TEKS ourselves, but we are a part of the groupings, the reviewers for that process. We observe that process. We ask questions about the process, and we can make revisions at the end of the finalized product. So the standards, that's what TEKS means. So it's the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So that's just a fancy word of saying standards. And for those who don't know, what is the importance of standards? Well, standards are kind of like the objective of a meeting. So we're in first grade, and what is the objective of first grade? What does a first grader need to know in first grade? Math, reading, writing, social studies, science. And so all of the foundational courses are underneath the State Board of Education's authority, as well as the CTE courses. The career and technical education courses. And so those are the courses that our high schoolers have options to those. And so those are the standards that we have the ability to approve. And also there's innovative courses as well. That's a whole different monster. And the reason I bring this up to you all is because not too long ago, the State Board of Education approved an ethics studies course. The Native American Indian course is what we passed, and it was an ethnic studies course, and I did approve those TEKS. And so but it didn't go through the normal natural process that foundational courses typically go through. So the state of Texas, our legislatures essentially gave schools the ability to become these districts of innovation, if you will. And it was a bill 1882, HB 82 in 2015. It was really radical education reform, honestly, is what it was. We had, at this point, textbooks were given a new definition, and schools were given different waivers. Let's say they didn't have to have parent permission to opt out of, let's say, a health class or different things like that. So they were given these waivers, and they were given in the spirit of improving the outcomes of their school districts by being creative and innovative in their approach. So let's say if I'm a school district, maybe I want to start a magnet school program, a program just for technology. I could do that under this law. Or let's say I wanted to write TEKS for different courses. And use it for my students. I could do that under this law. Well, that's what innovative courses are. They fall under that law. And so under that law, they're able to write their own TEKS. They're able to come up with the instructional materials for that, and they're able to pilot it. And so if they want to offer that course for the entire state of Texas, then it comes to the board. So there was a district that was teaching American Native Indian Studies, and they wanted to make that available to all students, right, in the state of Texas. So in my committee, I'm in the Committee of Instruction. There's 3 committees, by the way, where we're pulled out and we work in smaller groups to address some of the needs on the board. One is the Permanent School Fund Committee, and that is the committee that handles the Permanent School Fund. But a couple of legislations ago, the laws were changed, and now it's a public-private partnership. And we'll talk about the downfall of public-private partnerships. And I could tell you from just the Permanent School Fund, it was exclusively in the hands of your elected members. And now it is in the hands, it's in joint hands, it's in private corporations' hands, and they collaborate with the representatives on the board. What that means essentially is that there's less of our authority and oversight over that. So you can be the judge of, is that a good thing or a not so good thing? And so that's a $52 billion endowment fund that we have in the state of Texas, the highest amount of an endowment fund. And it was just money that was set aside just for Texas public school children. And so essentially with this endowment, the state of Texas would pay for every ISD's textbooks. Before the laws changed, before the education reform law, we would pay for everyone's textbooks as long as they came from the state board's approval list. So we would approve, and the incentive there, of course, was schools didn't have to pay that big burden, the price of their textbooks. So all their textbooks were taken care of, and the state board goes through a vetting process, right? It goes through a review process. It goes through experts leading that, and it goes through a lot of different hands, right, in oversight. So it was very appealing to some. They no longer have to use only state approved resources. They can use any of the resources that they want to still get that funding, but that's what it's for. So we have a committee of the permanent school fund, and then we have a committee of instruction. That's the committee that I'm on, and the committee of school initiative. So there's 3 committees that the 15 of us are divided into. And so that's essentially, so in my committee, I get to review innovative courses. So we had received, since I've been on the board, the innovative courses for this particular course about 3 times. And I voted against them, with exception for the last time. So they took the recommendations for the TEKS updates. We had attorneys review the TEKS in order to make sure that there were no DEI issues, that it did not break executive order from our President Trump. And so it went through a lot of different eyes to make sure that the TEKS were actually academically driven standards that gave students an understanding of this group of people, their contributions to the to American history, and it did it in a very neutral approach. And it was an approach where they used primary resources, where students were they were given research material. They had to research a lot of this material. They had to go and look at facts. So it was not opinionated. It was just strictly what were the laws, what were the differences in a lot of the different American Indian cultures here in our region here in the state of Texas versus outside of the Republic of Texas. So I thought that after the process, I strongly believe that we now have a good product to offer the students in the state of Texas. They've been waiting for these TEKS for a long time, and they did a lot of work, the writers of the TEKS, and it was a good product. I made this point to say that at our general board meeting, one of our my fellow board members said that there were 3 inappropriate TEKS in those materials, and that was false, actually. So she said there were TEKS in there where we said Indians were being scalped by people in the government. There were 3 TEKS like that. She said those are in the TEKS, but she obviously did not read the TEKS, and those TEKS were not inside, or those standards were not included in the TEKS. And I just want the public to know, because a lot of people went out to say that Member Brooks is not voting conservatively. She's not a woman of her word. And so I actually went to talk about it in other meetings, with constituents, my fellow Texans, and I brought copies of the TEKS with me. I said, you read it for yourself. You validate what you hear. You may hear someone slander or accusations made against your representatives, but go and fact check, go verify. Reagan said it well, trust but verify. And so I brought them the TEKS. I passed out a copy for everyone. I would go and speak, and I showed them there's nothing in here that would validate what our member accused us of approving. And I said, but on top of that, though, what she is referring to is some information that is recommended in the instructional materials for that course. And we did not accept that particular instructional material. We voted against it. We separated that motion and made a motion for simply the TEKS, and we removed that very questionable instructional material out of those standards. And I strongly believe that is a very good end result of just a beautiful representation of the contributions of a different group in our country, or not a different group, but an American group, right?
Yeah, awesome.
American Native Indians. So that's that story. So those are the things that we do. We approve instructional materials, And I can talk to you about how legislation has impacted what we do now.
Yeah, we're going to segue into that next. And thanks for your great explanation on how the SBOE works and is different than the TEA. So let's talk about how education is changing. I mean, we had a massive, measure pass in this legislative session for school choice, also known as the school voucher program. And I know that you and I had actually had a previous discussion offline about that decision and the best way to come about coming to that consensus. But how is education changing today, and how is the legislature impacting the public school system?
That's a wonderful question. I wanted to take you back to the time when we had 120,000 different public schools, right? Or different districts. So imagine your small towns, your one school, one room classroom structure. We had 120,000 of those situated all throughout the United States of America. And they were locally governed. That means parents, pastors, businessmen and women, people who were involved in the town, farmers, they would come together to decide on what was in the best interest for the children in their towns, in their communities. And it was effective. We out of that generation, we had some of the greatest minds, some of the greatest thinkers, presidents and statesmen and judges and teachers and I mean entrepreneurs. And so these children were really well educated. And the focus was on academics. The focus was on making sure that students were equipped with the skills that they needed to be productive and contributing citizens in our nation. So students were taught arithmetic. They were taught using standard algorithms. Students were taught history. They were taught sciences. They were taught English, reading, writing. And a lot of that happened using the Bible. So morals and values, those were important too when teaching our children academics. So it was effective and it worked. So now let's fast forward, and let's fast forward to a time now where we no longer have 120,000 independent school districts. We now have about 12,000 independent school districts or school districts spread throughout the United States. 1,203 of them approximately are here in the state of Texas. So we've really kind of consolidated control of our public education system. What kind of concerns me the most with the legislation that has come out is the fact that public education is compulsory. You have to take your child to school, or you could serve jail time. Your children could be taken away from you. So it's not a choice, which brings me to the point. A lot of people say, you know what, we need to run schools like a business. We need to provide different opportunities, different choices, right? So now you have this huge increase in charter schools. And now under school choice, under the school vouchers, you have now private school choices and homeschool choices. By the way, we already had those choices. But the question that was in front of our legislators was this: should the government regulate our choices for how we educate our children? And I want constituents to think about that. Texans, I want you to think, can the government teach our children better than local autonomy, local governance, than qualified teachers, certified teachers, can they do a better job than what we, the people, have envisioned for our children? Because that was really what it was all about. Should the state of Texas control and regulate how you homeschool, how you conduct a private school setting, and how you conduct public school education? And has it worked? So here's the way we can look at this. How effective is government schooling being run today? Is it really effective, or is it ineffective? And I will tell you something. We have an increasing population of functioning illiterate adults and young people. where they were not taught just those basic skills from those one room classrooms we were talking about that did not have the computer technology. It did not have even in some cases, the indoor running water. My husband, he's the son of a sharecropper. My mother-in-law, they didn't have running water in their homes until they bought a new home in 1970. They had an outhouse in the 70s. But guess what? They were smart. They were educated. It was driven, and the focus was on making sure they can read well, write well, spell well, do math, science, and social studies well. They were all intentional about educating the mind of children so that they could be independent thinkers who had the ability to be creative, who had the ability to innovate, who had the ability to reason, who had the ability to logically problem solve, who had the ability to communicate. They made sure that the ABCs of education were mastered. And so we have lost that focus in our government schooling. So can I say that the state, the Texas Education Agency, can do a better job of educating our children than we? Absolutely not. When we are producing children and young people who cannot do the basics, and we're expecting them to compete with a world that is light years ahead of us, we're expecting them to compete with, let's say, Chinese students who in third grade are learning pre-calculus. And our students, you know what our expectation is for high school math graduation is algebra 1. Algebra 1, not even calculus. So what are we doing? We're not teaching them how to read. We're not teaching them how to write well. And it's not because of our teachers. It's because of the new way of teaching. It's because of the new way of teaching math. It's because of the new way of teaching science and now history. History is going to be at our board meeting. It's this week. It's this week. Our board meeting lasts from Monday to Friday in Austin, and you can watch us in person or online, but get involved. You need to understand why we see the chaos happening in our schools. You need to understand why aren't our children learning anymore? We're paying and paying more money, and we work hard for our money. My husband worked so many hours to provide a good living for our 2 children, and he and I. And it comes at a cost. It comes at a price of sacrifice. You know, being the man of your home, the leader in your home, how hard it is to make a dollar, and how most parents, both parents, have to work outside of the home. So it's not a money issue here. It's a greed issue. It's a money power issue. It's a control issue that we're experiencing. And I've never seen anything quite like it in my lifetime. I will give you a specific example. HB 1605, which was passed in legislative 88 legislation. It totally restructured the way that instructional materials are approved. First of all, now most of our instructional materials are digital. We have software companies who are now publishers. So they are not in the business of academics. They are not in the business of a child's developmental process. And actually, I can be quite truthfully honest, a very good curriculum, they used to do research. Like they were able to validate the effectiveness of their curriculum before they even sent it out to the market. We are totally skipping through that phase. We are shaking hands and winking, hoping this is going to work, hoping that our children will learn effectively on this computer or this device. And none of it has been proven since this education system has changed through through Common Core. So remember I talked about the standards? Well, the standards, that is our foundation. What do children need to know by the end of first grade? What do they need to know by the end of ninth grade? That's a very important question. And it's usually driven by the developmental process of the child, the emotional, the intellectual process, cognitively, what can they handle? Are there, when, at what stage in life do we introduce it? At what stage in life do we expect them to master this skill? Very important process. So the federal government had come to every state in the nation and with federal standards called Common Core standards. And all 50 states have Common Core standards. That is your meat and potatoes. That is what every student needs to know. And since then, since Common Core standards, these federalized standards have come into the scene, our education system has taken a decline as far as what children now understand from a knowledge base. It changed. Let me give you an example of how this new math works. With this new math, students use calculators. So remember how when we were in school, Brandon, how you had to use, sometimes we couldn't even use a pencil. You had to just have some facts memorized. We had to memorize those facts. We had to memorize the multiplication facts, our addition and subtraction facts. We had to memorize that, and then before we could build on, right? But once we were secure in addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, percentages, we were able to go all the way up to calculus, trigonometry. We were able to soar. But when we are broken at the foundation, where you only have to memorize your facts to the threes, when your only expectation is that you're reading by third grade, then we have a problem. I teach 3-year-olds how to read. 3. I started my children reading at 3 years old. Did they catch on at 3? No, but they were secure in reading. So it does make a difference, the teaching methodology as well as your standards. So what did Common Core standards do? Common Core standards incorporate how you should teach that standard too. That makes it different. So not only should your children memorize how to their multiplication facts by threes, but now I'm going to tell you how you're going to teach them that skill. That's really what a curriculum is set for. That's not the standards role. The standards tell the teacher what your children need to know. And the curriculum publishers will come and say, this is how you can teach this standard. So with Common Core standards, they said, here is the standard and here is how you will teach it. It's that methodology that has proven to fail our students time after time, year after year. And we call those process standards. You now have to go through a process to get from 3 times 15, whatever your product is. You have to chart it out or look at pictures. You have to explain your picture. And it's delaying your progress. It holds them back from progressing. And so now your foundation is just a little bit more murky. I'll give you another example. We teach history differently now. How do we teach history? And that's why it's so important that you all tune in to this meeting this week, because we are discussing what is the best way to teach history. We know the best way to teach history is in chronological order, chronological sequence. Make it make sense to a child, especially at the fundamental level, the primary grade levels. What happens first? What happens second? Because that's what the developmental process of a child cognitively. That's how they process things. So the beginning, and then we usually start kindergarten with history in my community. There's police officers there, firefighters, and we kind of bring it home a little bit, and then we get into George Washington, and then we get into the role of a president, and they have something to kind of relate to. They can say, oh, that's kind of like my principal, how the president, and so they have it's all developmental. It's all a process that cannot be skipped, especially at the foundational years. So here's how it's presented to us now to teach new history the new way. The way that we teach history the new way is we introduce, they call it multi-layering. So let's say in first grade, we're going to teach them about the role of George Washington, the first president of the United States. And then we're going to talk about maybe a king, a pharaoh, the first pharaoh in Egypt. And now you just confuse the child. So we're not only just talking about the United States, we're talking about another nation, not just the same, time, but now we're talking about it's confusing. It's kind of like, here's the Bible, you have 66 books, and you just turn them upside down. Now figure it out. It doesn't start with the book of Genesis. It doesn't end with Revelation. You kind of just, it's not in order. And so it's a confusing way of learning history. And it's this multi-layering that students it's not even been researched, right? Because at the end of the day, we're at a handshake and a wink. Everything is happening so rapidly, so quick. There's no time for real studies. We say everything is evidence-based. This is the question. Show me where your studies are. How many schools did you go in and have a pre-assessment, a mid-assessment, and a post-assessment that shows the effectiveness and the validity of your program or of your standards? There's nothing to prove this. Something else with 1605, it gave our state, the Texas Education Agency, legal access to publishing its own curriculum. So now our agency is in the book publishing company or digital software publishing. And let me tell you something. When you are also the same agent that is vetting vendors and publishers for their materials, while at the same time vetting your own, only one winner comes out of that, and that is the agency's curriculum. It is a different teaching methodology. It does follow Common Core standards, and it is not an effective way to teach our children. And so we can do better. So the question I have is, why would you take control over the curriculum? And then that goes back to the standards. My question as your board member is then, when do I get to revise math standards? When do we get to revise social studies? And well, now we're doing that now, but it was mandated. But science, when will we get to revise these TEKS? And we're into 2030 before we can make any more revisions to a lot of these foundational courses.
Wow.
So it changes the whole process. School vouchers, now what you can expect is it will be regulated. Your homeschool will be regulated. It's optional now to take the money, but it will expand just like it has expanded across this nation and just like it has expanded internationally, because many nations have taken on universal education. Has universal health care worked effectively for us? Well, how in the world will universal education work where it is controlled by one person? And that is our commissioner of education. So that's a lot of power for one person to decide and make those sort of decisions. Fast forward, so we have HB2. This whole notebook that I have right here is the 230-page law that was passed. HB2 is radically reforming public education. And it is not putting the best interests of our children first. It gave all the control over to our commissioner of education. And lastly, HB 8 just passed in this special session. That is the accountability. Everything revolves in school systems around accountability. A rating system of a D or an F can close an entire school district and give all their control over to the agency. These are our community schools where there's no longer an elected board of trustees, where the state comes in with its own people and its own curriculum and its own innovative ideas. And it's been hurting our communities. I just want to say that. Another thing I want people to know, charter schools. When I first got elected to be your board member, I said, school choice. But I had to understand that this is not school choice. This is actually taking away our choices. And the same with our charter schools. Charter schools are expanding quickly and rapidly. And as a result, our local schools are being shut down. We can't walk our kids to the neighborhood school anymore because we don't have the resources anymore, because those students are going to neighborhood charter schools. So the funding from our hard-earned tax dollars are leaving our communities, going across the entire state of Texas, everywhere but where we live and work and worship and play. And as a result, schools are closing or they're being overcrowded. Everything has a consequence. It's kind of like a domino effect. We, as an educated citizenry, have to understand that we have to get involved. We have to watch those board meetings. We have to have conversations with our leaders. We have to know what bills and laws are being passed that are restricting us from doing the right thing by our children, our future generation. It's not necessarily your school board or your ISD. These are laws that are being passed by our very own elected legislators. They are not gatekeeping for our children. They are not holding the line. And we have to rise up and hold them accountable. I think it's a beautiful thing to self-govern ourselves. What do you think?
Absolutely, man. I am all for limited form of government and self-governance. And honestly, if we would just govern ourselves, we would not need this, massive centralized government bureaucracy that we've created over healthcare and education and everything else. We've centralized too much power into the hands of bureaucrats. And the bureaucrats are unelected. I mean, most of them are appointed. They're just basically no accountability. It's almost like the Federal Reserve banking system. They're autonomous. The president can't fire the chairman. Congress can't put them out of business. They're just autonomous, but they have all the power over our money. And the same thing's happening with education. The same thing's happening with healthcare and other industries as well. It's out of control. And I think you're right. We, the people, need to govern ourselves. We need to teach our own kids. We need to, be the ones that we know what's best for our communities. We need to bring it back to the local level, right? The local community, the local level is where we do most of our life and living and raise our families. And that's where we need to bring the control back. Like you said in the very beginning of this interview, when there were, thousands of school districts, every little town had a school. And everybody was a part of educating the community, and their kids and had a hand in education. So got about, 2 minutes left here. Are there any encouragements or encouraging thoughts that you can give parents that are betwixt and between public education, charter schools, private Christian school, homeschool, or what do I do with the school voucher? Am I even going to get the voucher? I mean, it only affects 100,000 school kids in Texas, which is a drop in the bucket. So parents need some encouragement. How do they navigate this sea of stuff?
I love that question. What a great question, a great way to conclude. Parents, I go to a lot of empty boardrooms for our board meetings each month. The way that you can start to get involved, actively involved in your child's education, go to those board meetings. Once a month, commit to going to your local ISD board meeting. Commit to maybe adopting a new teacher in your school, where you just kind of love on them and encourage them and build relationship. Maybe go into your schools, your local schools once a month, offer donuts for teachers, get to know the teachers. Teachers are very isolated inside of their schools. Parents, you must now take ownership of the education of your children's lives. You must now make sure that your children can read well, write well, spell well, understand the richness of our history and the sciences. And you know what? It starts with you, mom and dad. A lot of times we're thinking a different school district will help, or this charter school will help, or this private school will help, but you are missing. You are the only thing that a child really needs in this day and age to be successful. Stay involved. And if you don't get a book coming home, you provide the books. Read again as a family, work again together, count your coins together. My heart is overjoyed when I see parents reading at the airport with their child. Or when I see parents showing their children how to count math and how to count money, how to count numbers, how to build that base. Parents, just start just start until we can collectively come together to repeal these laws and work together to take back our self-governance, to take back our ability to make decisions for ourselves. We must get involved in all things children, get in their world, come to know their teachers, and then get involved at the state board level or your local school board level. At this level, you could serve in a work group. You can serve reading some of the instructional materials and write us. Every member reads your emails. When you shoot off a lot of emails to every member about something that you notice or about a solution, you have our attention. You CC everybody and you wait till you get a response. If you can't get anywhere at the local level, reach out to me and all the other 14 board members. We are closer to you than you realize.
Awesome. Thank you, Evelyn, so much for coming on our show tonight and just sharing your wisdom in the realm of education and encouraging parents. Want to mention also that tomorrow night we have an event that's going on with McKinney Values Pack. I'm going to be speaking on a panel of pastors on the topic, why Christians should be involved in politics. And Steve Maxwell, who is the co-founder of Citizens Defending Freedom, will be there. Ben Quine from Christians Engaged will be there, and Pastor Jimmy Pruitt from the Bridge Church will be there. This will be held at Genesis Church in McKinney. And if you'd like more information, go to my website, which is danielnation.com. I'm going to put up the address on the screen there. It's danielnation.com/events, and you can purchase a ticket. I believe it's $10 to go to that event. Evelyn, what a blessing to see you again, my friend. I wish you the very best. Thank you for fighting for our kids and fighting for the state of Texas and all that you're doing on our Board of Education. We appreciate you, and thank you so much. And thanks for being on the show tonight. God bless you.
God bless you as well. God bless you, Texas.